Her presence in that garage was never intended. A 9-year-old simply retrieving an errant ball. Yet when Lacey gazed upward and gestured, every member of the motorcycle club became motionless. A surveillance device sits overhead. Her discovery would expose a scheme to demolish their headquarters and reveal the individual responsible for installing it. How would you react if a young person noticed something every adult overlooked? The incident began with a challenge. 9-year-old Lacey Worthington possessed quick reflexes and even sharper observation skills. She'd been engaged in a wild game of tag with two companions, involving a partially deflated rubber sphere, a single muddy puddle, and considerable yelling near Hawthorne Park's perimeter. The summer twilight carried the scent of freshly mowed lawns and the sound of pure joy. Owen, her older and irritating playmate, struck the ball with excessive force. After one bounce against the pavement, it rolled directly through the entrance of the Iron Jaws Motorcycle Clubhouse. "That ball's lost for good," he remarked while turning to leave. Lacey, however, remained, her gaze fixed on the broad entrance, gaping like an open mouth, displaying multiple pristine motorcycles arranged in formation. Their fuel tanks gleamed like mirrors, leather saddlebags hung beneath, and protective headgear rested on wall-mounted hooks. Music played softly within, while occasional metallic sounds emerged from the depths. Clearly an adult space, somewhere children weren't welcome. Yet she advanced one step, then another. Crossing the threshold, the atmosphere cooled. The aromas transformed. Engine lubricant, leather, coffee, and something subtly sweet lingered. The type of scent that clings to denim and lowers people's vocal tones. Nobody prevented her entry. She located her ball beneath a workstation and prepared to depart when something overhead captured her attention. Her head tilted as she stopped moving. A timber crossbeam extended across the garage's length. Dust adhered to it like animal fur. Yet directly above the office entrance, one section appeared different. A circular area seemed lighter, suspiciously pristine. Centered within that area sat something compact, circular, and dark. "A surveillance device is mounted there," she announced. 3 adult men wearing black leather vests turned simultaneously. One of them, a stocky man sporting a gray beard and eyes resembling wet pavement, lifted his eyebrow. "We're not involved in espionage here, young lady." Yet Lacey remained serious. She moved forward while pointing. "It's genuine. Notice how the dust pattern breaks around it. Someone handled it recently. That section's spotless." The room fell completely silent. Randy called a taller individual from the rear. "Retrieve the stepladder." Though grumbling, curiosity drove old Randy to extract a collapsed ladder from behind the equipment racks and ascend gradually, a flashlight gripped between his teeth. Upon reaching the beam and squinting closely, he uttered just one word: "Damn." Minutes later, the garage had transformed. Motorcycles were repositioned to one side. A workstation was emptied. Randy had extracted the miniature black surveillance device from its concealed location, no larger than a coin, with cabling spliced into the overhead electrical strip. The truly startling aspect wasn't the apparatus itself. It was the indicator light. "It's transmitting," Randy announced, noting the red LED remained active. Club President Dean McCrae emerged from his office. A lanky man with sun-weathered skin and hands resembling steel clamps. He examined the camera once and said nothing, merely stared. Then he addressed one of the younger members. Summon Gary. Within 20 minutes, Lacey's father arrived in his pickup. Gary Worthington wasn't particularly talkative. He'd performed electrical installations in virtually every structure throughout town, some legitimate, others questionable. Yet he understood wiring better than human behavior. His thinning hair, overly tight shirt, and repeated glances at Lacey suggested uncertainty whether to reprimand or commend her. After examining the device, he frowned. "This doesn't belong to you?" Dean inquired. "Negative," Gary responded while kneeling beside the table. He carefully opened the housing, exposing a miniature circuit board and relay antenna pressed against the plastic exterior. "This equipment isn't old, likely installed within the past fortnight. Wireless broadcasting, powerful signal, possibly relaying through a nearby transmitter or private server. Can you track it?" Dean questioned. Gary paused. "Perhaps, though not immediately. I'll require equipment from my workshop and assistance with those ceiling panels." Dean looked toward Randy, then Lacey. "You truly just noticed it?" he asked. Lacey confirmed with a nod. The dust pattern revealed it. He released a low whistle, then smiled, apparently a rarity judging by appearances. "You possess keen eyesight, eagle eye." She blinked. "Is that my designation now?" "Certainly is." Just like that, the bikers moved around her with quiet reverence. Someone provided her hot chocolate, overly sweet, laden with marshmallows. Another retrieved an old club emblem and attached it to her sweatshirt. "Upside down. Signifies probationary status." Randy grunted. "Cannot wear it properly until you demonstrate worth." Lacey's smile stretched so wide her face ached. Gary packed the camera silently, jaw clenched, not from anger, but from the burden of knowing his daughter observed what he hadn't. When Dean placed a hand on his shoulder asking, "Are you prepared to help investigate this?" he didn't hesitate, simply nodded once. During the truck ride home with Lacey beside him and the case position between them, Gary finally spoke. "You understand you shouldn't have entered there, correct?" "I understand. And you realize I'm proud of you, correct?" She turned, surprised. "Truly?" He nodded. "You observed something everyone else missed. Age doesn't matter. That's significant." They sat quietly momentarily. Then Lacey whispered, "Father, do you believe someone's genuinely attempting to harm them?" Gary focused on the road. "I'm uncertain, sweetheart, but if someone's monitoring, it indicates they're planning something." Behind them in the now silent garage, Dean stood alone beside the vacant beam, fingers brushing the dust. He recalled the face of someone from years past, a youth who once assisted him rebuilding an engine using nothing but salvaged materials and determination. And he knew precisely where to begin investigating. The following morning, heat shimmered above Hawthorne Park. Inside the Iron Jaws garage, the temperature was cooler yet tense. Gary stood atop a ladder, sleeves rolled up, threading wires through ceiling panels. He'd been there since dawn, installing a detection tool of his own creation, a discrete handheld apparatus designed to identify hidden frequencies and power drainage. Around him, bikers operated with unusual precision. What began as a close brotherhood had evolved into something resembling an operational unit. Dean observed from the corner, characteristically silent. "Discovered anything yet?" he eventually asked. Gary exhaled while wiping his forehead. "Nothing additional. No other cameras inside. But I'm pinpointing where that initial one transmitted data. Signal strength was substantial. It didn't require distance. Local. Gary confirmed with a nod. Definitely. That's when Lacey entered. She carried a tablet awkwardly beneath one arm, gripping it as though it weighed more than it did. Someone had fashioned her a vest from an old bandana stitched with the Iron Jaws emblem. It didn't fit properly. The print was crooked, yet she wore it like protective armor. "Do you people utilize Duck Search?" she inquired. Everyone stared. "What?" Randy responded. "It's a search crawler that doesn't retain cookies. I discovered information about it on a forum. I searched for unusual signal reports online, locations where connections appeared but didn't belong." She rotated the screen toward Gary. "Right here, directly east of the garage. That's where the signal relayed to." Gary blinked, then smiled slightly. That's excellent, Lace." Dean leaned toward the tablet. "You're certain this is accurate? Provide me transport, and I'll demonstrate." 5 minutes later, Lacey and Dean were cruising gradually down a rear alley on a Softail. She sat rigidly behind him, gripping the improvised tablet holder she'd constructed from a cereal container and adhesive tape. He parked outside the rust-stained storage facility just beyond the fence. Gary arrived minutes later in his truck, tools in tow. The three stood silently before the orange metal door as though confronting a sealed tomb. Dean tapped the roll-up door with his knuckle. "I own this property," he muttered. "Not this unit specifically, but the building. The club purchased it 3 years ago. Some units are subleased. Randy manages the documentation. Can we access it?" Gary asked. "Already contacted a locksmith. That didn't require one." Before Dean could continue, the door rattled. A youth in a polo shirt emerged. Eyes widened, clipboard clutched to his chest. He froze upon seeing Dean and attempted to pivot away. "Hold on," Dean said, stepping forward. The youth panicked and dropped his clipboard. Dean retrieved it, examining the paperwork. "Storage Unit 14B, rented under Iron Jaws Motorcycle Maintenance Fund, authorized signature." He paused and named nobody recognized. He handed the document to Gary. "This is counterfeit. How can you determine that?" Dean questioned. "Because I created the database it references," Gary muttered. "This is a fabricated front. Someone invented a club subsidiary that doesn't exist. That's why they used a physical mail drop instead of a digital key." Lacey peered inside. Crates. 3 of them, heavy, black, unmarked. One had a fractured lid, revealing a polished chrome motorcycle muffler wrapped in plastic. She examined a packing label and frowned. "These shipping codes are incorrect," she said. Dean stepped beside her. "Incorrect how?" "They used the outdated formatting. We discontinued using these letters in 2022. These are meant to appear like recent deliveries, but they're using obsolete tags." Gary extracted his phone and began photographing. "This is an arrangement. They're planting stolen motorcycle components and documentation designed to make it appear we're trafficking. If this remained hidden, someone could have raided the garage and connected it to us." Dean's jaw tensed. He turned to Gary. "Who'd possess access to this type of forgery? Who'd want us eliminated and understand how to construct something like this?" Gary hesitated. Then he stated a name. "Preston Grant." Dean didn't respond. He didn't need to. That evening, the clubhouse was quiet. Only a few patch members remained, sprawled across chairs with old war stories and cold pizza. Lacey sat cross-legged near the rear wall, drawing in a worn notebook someone had given her. Her notebook wasn't filled with flowers or stars. It displayed wiring paths, floor layouts, and signal ranges resembling a blueprint drafted in crayon. Where did you learn to do that? Randy asked, looking over her shoulder. She shrugged. I enjoy puzzles. They make sense. People don't. He chuckled. Ain't that the truth? Gary and Dean sat in the office with the door slightly ajar. Their voices were hushed but urgent. You're certain it's Preston? Dean asked. He owns 3 LLCs that lease properties nearby. One is connected to a tech firm specializing in surveillance logistics. And someone's been bribing city council to rezone the park and this entire block. If the club loses legal status, Preston gains first rights. Dean rubbed his temples. He always claimed he wanted to clean up the block. I just didn't think he'd destroy us to accomplish it. You two were acquainted. We were kids, Dean muttered. Built a motorbike together from lawnmower components. He accepted the college scholarship. I remained here. Guess one of us chose incorrectly. Outside, Lacey continued drawing, but her hearing was acute. She heard everything why the following morning the club had transformed. A whiteboard had materialized near the garage entrance, covered in notes and times, patrol shifts, license plates, delivery logs. Lacey had her own corner now, dubbed the Nest, a high stool with a desk lamp and a toolkit someone donated. She wore noise-canceling headphones, not connected to anything, just to help her concentrate. Gary helped install new internal cameras. But this time, they were the observers. Dean handed Lacey an old patch with an eagle stitched in red thread. You're not just probationary anymore, he said. You're our scout. She beamed. And for the first time since it began, the iron jaws weren't reacting. They were preparing, because someone tried to destroy them with wires and lies. But now ghosts had faces and soon names. The trap wasn't noisy. That was Dean's rule. No commotion, no force. If someone's watching, we let them believe we're careless. By midweek, the Iron Jaws garage looked exactly how an outsider would hope it looked, careless. Toolboxes left open. A bike parked halfway blocking the meeting table. A heated argument staged just loud enough to travel, just messy enough to seem genuine. Lacey knew it was an act. She also knew how convincing it appeared. From her corner in the Nest, she watched the new internal feeds Gary had installed. Clean angles, hardwired, no wireless vulnerability that on a separate screen. Gary monitored signal traffic around the block, tracking any spike that didn't belong. Shortly after 3 p.m., one appeared. Gary leaned closer to his monitor. We've got activity. Dean didn't move. He just nodded once and kept talking, deliberately louder now, leaning into the performance. A dispute about storage inventory, about parts that weren't logged properly. The signal pulsed again. They're watching, Gary whispered. Lacey swallowed. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, eyes locked on the screen. Not fear, but something colder, sharper, like when the wind pauses before glass shatters. The spike didn't originate from the storage unit. It came from across the street. Gas station, Lacey murmured. Look at the bounce. Gary followed her finger. You're correct. That's not a server. That's a mobile relay. Dean's eyes narrowed. Someone local. They didn't move. That was the hardest part. 10 minutes later, a man exited the gas station convenience store, phone pressed to his ear. He wore a delivery jacket with no logo and glanced toward the garage without turning his head. Lacey zoomed in. That's him, the one who dropped the crates. I saw him last week. Gary checked the timestamp. He's talking while monitoring the feed. That's our confirmation. Dean leaned back against a bike, arms crossed. Who's he calling? Lacey listened, not through the phone, through patterns. He keeps moving when things get louder, like he's waiting for a mess. Dean smiled, slow and humorless. Let's give him what he wants. Inside the garage, the argument escalated. A chair scraped. A metal tool clattered to the floor. One of the younger bikers slammed his fist on the table, right where the original hidden camera had been aimed. The man's phone call ended abruptly. "He just cut the line," Gary said. "Good," Dean replied. "Means he's switching plans." They waited. 5 minutes passed. Then Lacey noticed something else. "Dad, there's another signal. Not streaming, just pinging." Gary frowned. "That's not surveillance." Dean looked over. "Then what is it?" She hesitated. "A trigger, like a notification. He's alerting someone." At 4 p.m., a black sedan rolled slowly past the garage and didn't stop. Dean caught the plate number. Randy caught the look on Dean's face. "Friends of yours?" he asked. "No," Dean said, "but I know who they belong to." That night, the garage went dark. Lights off, doors closed, bikes gone. The iron jaws didn't vanish. They scattered 0.2 blocks away. Gary sat in his truck with Lacey beside him, both of them watching the storage unit from across the street. Lacey had insisted on coming. "If they move the parts, we'll miss it." Then the sedan returned. 2 men exited. One rolled up the unit door. Lacey held her breath. "They're rearranging the crates, taking pictures. They're trying to make it look active, like the club's moving inventory at night." Gary started recording. Then headlights flooded the alley. Police, 3 cruisers, too fast, too clean. "Dad, this isn't right," Lacey said. Gary cursed under his breath. They called it in. Inside the unit, one of the men panicked. He bolted. The other froze. Dean stepped out of the shadows, hands raised, calm, waiting. The officers hesitated when they saw him. When they saw the crates already open, when they saw the timestamps on Gary's camera running uninterrupted for hours. "This isn't what it looks like," one of the officers muttered. Dean didn't smile. "That's the point." By morning, statements were taken, phones confiscated. One man was detained. The other wasn't so lucky. His call log led straight to a shell company under Preston Grant's umbrella. Still, no arrest was made. Not yet, because Preston hadn't shown his hand, and everyone in that garage knew it. Lacey sat on the curb afterward, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the empty unit. "They almost won," she said softly. Dean crouched beside her. "Almost doesn't count." She looked up. "What now?" Dean glanced towards City Hall in the distance, lights glowing even this late. "Now," he said, "we stop hiding." The council chamber smelled like old carpet and coffee nobody drank. Rows of wooden benches lined the back wall, filled with a mix of city staff, residents, and 2 men in suits flipping legal pads with forced disinterest dot up front. The 5 council members sat in a semicircle under fluorescent lighting that made everything feel flatter than it was. Dean McCrae stood quietly in the second row. Next to him sat Gary, tie crooked, hands clasped. And between them, legs swinging off the edge of her chair, was Lacey. She wore her patched-up vest over a clean blue hoodie. Someone had ironed her jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, not because anyone asked her to, but because she said she wanted to look ready. The council president adjusted his microphone. Next on the agenda, Item 7C, Rezoning Proposal 14-52B, submitted by the Grant Redevelopment Trust. Murmurs on cue. Preston Grant stepped forward, tanned, polished, in a tailored navy suit. He smiled like a man who had already counted the votes. Behind him, a tall assistant rolled out a printed blueprint of the proposed development. The glossy panels showed clean sidewalks, luxury apartments, bike paths, no trace of the Iron Jaws garage, no green space, no basketball hoops, no kids. This project, Preston began, represents a chance to revitalize a neglected part of Hawthorne. We've consulted with architects, sustainability experts, and local safety committees to ensure that. He paused as a group of men in black vests quietly entered the back of the room. Dean didn't look. He didn't need to. They weren't there to intimidate. They were there to witness. Lacey's fingers gripped the folder on her lap. Inside it were the photos, the timestamps, the signal trace map she'd helped Gary draw. Everything that mattered. The council president glanced at the audience. We've received a formal challenge to this proposal, claiming unlawful surveillance, falsified documentation, and attempted entrapment. A statement will be given. The room quieted. Dean stood. Then, to everyone's surprise, he didn't walk forward. He turned to Lacey. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded. Gary squeezed her shoulder once. "Go ahead, kiddo." The microphone was taller than she was. A city worker helped lower it. Her voice, when it came, was small but steady. "My name is Lacey Worthington. I'm 9. I live on Lemon Street, and I play at Hawthorne Park almost every day, the one you're about to erase." A few chuckled softly, but she didn't pause. "Last week, I found a hidden camera in the Iron Jaws garage. It wasn't theirs. It was aimed at their table, and it was sending video to a signal point by the gas station. My dad helped trace it. The stream bounced through a server used by a company owned by Mr. Grant." Preston shifted. She opened her folder, held up a photograph, a zoomed-in shot of the camera's lens circled in red. Then another, the tracking diagram. Then the forged storage rental agreement. She didn't stumble. "I like puzzles," she said, "and I know when things don't add up. These papers were made to look like the motorcycle club was doing something wrong. But I was there. I watched. They were being framed." The assistant tried to interrupt. "Councilman, this child's testimony is backed by digital evidence," Gary said, standing. "I can confirm the technical details. I've submitted the device's firmware history and a report from an independent analyst. The camera was active, transmitting, and intentionally placed." Dean rose now, too. "We also have recorded footage of 2 individuals altering the scene. One of them was on Mr. Grant's payroll until yesterday." The room shifted. Preston's smile faltered. One council member leaned into her mic. "Do you have this footage?" "Yes," Gary said, producing a USB drive. Preston stood, jaw tight. "This is a coordinated smear campaign, manufactured outrage from a group with a history of, well, less than civic behavior." Dean tilted his head. "And yet somehow you're the only one on record signing 3 leases under different shell companies tied to a project you were planning to approve." Silence. Then the youngest councilman, a quiet man with a salt and pepper beard, looked up. "I was at that park last weekend. Watched a girl fall off the monkey bars. 3 bikers were there before the parents even stood up. No one responded, but something shifted in the room. The vote was delayed. The footage was reviewed. And 2 days later, Preston Grant was arrested for conspiracy, fraud, and unlawful surveillance. The development deal collapsed. Weeks later, Hawthorne Park looked the same, but it felt different. The basketball net had new chain links. The grass was patchy but freshly cut. And the Iron Jaws garage had a fresh coat of paint. A mural across one wall showing a girl pointing upward at a beam. No face, just her arm and the caption underneath. Look closer. Dean was back under the hood of a bike. Randy was teaching a teenager how to sand a gas tank. Gary had finally fixed the flickering overhead light. And Lacey, she sat on her stool in the nest, drawing again. Only this time, she wasn't diagramming circuits. She was sketching a new layout, half garage, half learning lab. A space for fixing things and figuring things out. Thinking of expanding, Gary asked, leaning over her shoulder. Maybe. He looked at her with pride he no longer tried to hide. You change a lot of lives, Lace. She smiled. I just saw what was already there. Dean passed behind them, slow, deliberate, a paper bag in one hand. He set it gently on the workbench beside Lacey. Inside was a pair of clear lens safety goggles, a bad-shaped patch with a red eagle, and a keychain shaped like a wrench. Scout, it read. You didn't just help us, Dean said quietly. You reminded us why we're here. She ran her thumb over the word Scout like it might fade. Her eyes stayed dry, but her breath caught just once. This story reminds us. Sometimes a child sees what grown-ups forget to notice. Not just cameras, but truth, loyalty, and what's worth protecting. That if you were in Lacey's shoes, would you have spoken up? Comment below and tell us. And if you believe small voices can spark big change, like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to Embrace the Journey for more stories that stay with you. See you in our next video.